The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. We're celebrating the life of Keizan, who's one of the greatest ancestors in the Japanese tradition. And he was, as it said in the dedication, he came with a very bad temper. And he managed to convert that into deep compassion. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the conversion of karma. I was reading something the other night on the internet. They were talking about extraordinary people are not people who were particularly intelligent or did some sort of worldly thing or made a lot of money or became famous or whatever, but people who were able to look at themselves and see what needed to be changed and got about the business of changing themselves. And I was thinking, well, that's pretty much what the Buddha did. He didn't build buildings or leave great legacy of worldly activities, but he did take a good look at himself and see what needed changing, and he got on with changing it. And this in and of itself is quite an extraordinary act when you think that it's been over 2,500 years since his death, and we're still benefiting from his teaching as a result of the effort that he made to change himself. And this conversion of, in the second chapter of the Shishogi, Dogen writes about the conversion and contrition and confession. May all the Buddhas and the ancestors who have become enlightened have compassion upon us. Free us from the obstacle of suffering which we have inherited from our past existence, and lead us in such a way that we may share in the merit that fills the universe. For they in the past were as we are now, and we will be as they in the future. All the evil committed by me is caused by beginningless greed, anger, and delusion. All the evil is committed by our body, speech, and mind. I now confess everything wholeheartedly. Now, by the guidance of the Buddhas and ancestors, we can discard and purify all of our karma, body, speech, and mind, and realize the immaculacy of emptiness that fills the universe. And this is about, again, this looking at ourselves and seeing what it is that we need to do to put an end to our suffering. Because whether the external events are not the thing that creates the suffering, it's how we deal with those external events that creates the suffering. And we have to learn how to transform that. Master Jisho was telling us one time about the bus system in London during World War II. And they decided they'd streamline it a bit by not having them stop at every stop. So there was a little sign on the bus stop that said, step off the curb and wave your hand. The driver, he will understand. Underneath that was written, of course he'll understand the cuss, but will he stop the ruddy bus? Well, that's our particular dilemma. We may understand, but have we stopped? And this is what ceasing from evil is about. It's not that we're going around killing all sorts of beings or starting wars and stuff, but we have angers and fears and greeds and things that we need to take a look at. But we have to look at them in a compassionate way. Somebody asked Reverend Master Jisho one day, he says, why am I still so angry? And she said, you're not fed up enough. And it's getting to that place where you have to see, I don't want to do this anymore. Whether it's anger, whether it's fear, whether it's greed, distractions, entertainments, whatever our particular forms of karma is. We have to see what we are doing, and we have to make this resolve to change that. It's not going to happen just because we're nice people. It happens because we're making not only a resolve, but we're actually changing what it is that we do. So when we're confronted by fear or greed or anger, how do we deal with that? It has to do with what our Master Ji called spiritual maturity. This is the ability to learn how to respond from the heart instead of simply react out of old karmic conditioned patterns of behavior. Somebody pushes those buttons and we get fearful, or somebody pushes the button and we get angry. It's not because they push the button, it's because we have this unconverted karma. And we have to learn that there's a way of dealing with this stuff. Talking to somebody recently who saw that her indulging in her inadequacy was in fact breaking all the precepts, because it's clinging to this idea that I'm not a whole adequate being and there's something I'm lacking. But in fact, we are whole adequate beings. The only thing that's lacking is our willingness to see what it is that we need to do to change ourselves and then get on with doing it. And it's the getting on with doing it that's the tricky part. And I was thinking about the Buddha's confrontation with Mara on the eve of his enlightenment. I was reading a lovely book by Pema Chödrön called Living Beautifully, and she refers to Mara, which is how the Buddha personified this old karma as his nemesis. And nemesis is a Greek word meaning was a Greek goddess who was the kind of divine retribution. She, especially for people with a lot of pride, their nemesis would show up and it's like the pride goeth before the fall. The nemesis is the one that pulls the rug out from under the pride. And there's a lovely Agatha Christie book called Nemesis. It's Miss Marple is being hired by this wealthy man to track down the murderer of his son's fiancée, even if it meant that his son was going to go to jail for this, if he actually did it, because she was going to find out the truth no matter what the consequences of that. And she was seen as the nemesis there. She was going to see what it is that she had to do no matter what it took to do that. And she did, of course. She found the murderer, and it wasn't the man's son. But this idea of a nemesis is especially in Greek tragedy and in Western literature, it's a very fundamental way of looking at the thing that trips us up, especially when we've been proud or gotten too big for ourselves. And the Buddha dealt with Mara as his nemesis, as he made the resolve that he was just going to sit there until he actually realized the truth, no matter what it took. And that's when Mara pulled out all the stops. Armies, beautiful women, all his greeds, angers, and fears were being thrown at him. And he sat still and did not move. And it was that willingness to sit still. He also would say, when Mara showed up, he says, "Mara, I recognize you." He could actually see that this was simply old karmic habit patterns. Whether it was greed, fear, lust, anger, whatever it was, he could see that, and he personified that as Mara coming to try to distract him. And once Mara was seen, of course, Mara disappeared. Because those things have power over us only when we don't recognize them and see them for what they are. We have to look at ourselves with compassion, however, not with judgment. If you look at yourself with judgment, that's it. You've reached the conclusion, bad person, there's no more to learn. But if you look with compassion, you see that, wait a second. Maybe there is something I can do. I don't have to give in to entertain this lustful feeling or to get angry at somebody just because they did something that I didn't particularly like. And see that there is room to move. Master T used to say that when you're doing the best you can, you're going to be able to see where you can do better. So there's always a step there for you to be able to take. And our willingness to see that there's room to move, this is this gap there of compassion that shows us that there is this place that I can do something about this situation. If my greed is another serving of something, I can say, no, I've had enough. I can let go of that. If my anger is there, I can say, stop, wait a second. Wait a second. Is there a wiser way to deal with this? Does anger ever solve anything? And there are all sorts of things that you can do, skillful means. One of the four wisdoms is generosity, tenderness or compassion, benevolence, this is skillful means, and sympathy and sympathetic joy. Can you look at, there was a story in one of our most recent journal, which was an e-journal, about a man from Holland who went on a trip and he came back a bit early and found that the neighbor who was taking care of his pet had put this huge plant in his drawing room. And the neighbor was very embarrassed because he wasn't expecting him back so soon. But the man who came home said, "Oh, it's a guest." It's a very friendly guest. It drinks its own water, it doesn't make a mess, and doesn't say anything. And I thought that was really quite a skillful way of dealing with this person's embarrassment for having put this plant over there. And finding skillful ways to also to look at ourselves and see what it is that we need to do or can do about this whole process of conversion. Because we recite this confession verse not only once at Jukai when we take the precepts and become lay Buddhists, but we do it twice a month when we do our renewal of vows, because we constantly have to be renewing this effort to see what it is that needs to be changed and finding compassionate and ways of dealing with this, skillful ways. I was visiting some relatives earlier in the year, and my brother's granddaughter, who was 4 years old at the time, she has a Nemesis dragon that she lives with. And this Nemesis dragon, according to her older sister, who is 7, never does anything nice. And I was sitting in the garage, the big garage door was open, and she was playing under the table. I was cleaning up small tools for my brother. And she was going on to these trips to Mexico and Canada, and this island 300 miles off the coast of California. I don't know what that island's about, but she knew that. And every once in a while, little something would pass from a little hand underneath the table up to me. A piece of paper, string, little something she found on the floor there. And I kept saying, well, I think this is from the Nemesis dragon. And there would be a pause. Nothing would be said. And then I'd get another little gift. And I'd say, oh, this Nemesis dragon must be getting converted. And I could feel this little smile underneath this table. No words, just... And then more and more gifts, and finally this beautiful little kid's umbrella. Clear plastic umbrella with little pink flowers on it. But she could feel this delight coming from her that this Nemesis dragon that never does anything nice could be converted. And what we have to see is this part of us that has this Mara or this Nemesis dragon or whatever it is, that our old karma that needs conversion. We need to be able to make it our friend. Be able to see what it is there, what the greed or the fear, the anger, whatever, and see how it is that we can make what I call these fine-tuning adjustments. We can look at it slightly differently. And this idea of converting through the four wisdoms, she was starting with generosity. And it was a natural thing for her to want to do this. Because generosity is just a natural thing for people. But the fact that she could see it as converting her Nemesis dragon. Where does a 4-year-old get this idea of a Nemesis dragon? But she was just delighted with the idea. And she could see that she could just do more. She could give more. And a lot of compassion is this giving something that we don't want to give. Giving our attention, giving, patience is this opening of the heart, this giving out rather than holding on. Because all that suffering is created by our clinging to our desires and angers and frustrations and fears. And that giving is this opening up of the heart. Thich Nhat Hanh talked about patience as terms of the Chinese character of a sharp knife and being the opening of the heart, the sharp knife opening above the heart. And this opening of the heart, so the heart is big enough to hold the sharp thing without causing any harm to anybody. And this opening up, this making ourselves big enough to hold this anger or this fear and not run away or not act on it. And that's this part that converts that karma. It's the letting go of this hardness of heart, this wanting something or not wanting something, this clinging. But we have to see that we're doing this. Again, looking with compassion, oh, I'm doing this again. I can stop this. I don't have to continue doing that. It's like the bus driver. He can stop the bus. We can do the things that are needed. But we have to see with these eyes of compassion. We have to look in a way that allows us to change. Because the flexibility, this ability to change, comes from what Dogen calls the kaleidoscopic mind. The kaleidoscope is this bunch of glass that turns around in this thing, the tube that has a mirror in it, and every time you turn it a little bit, it just changes the whole picture. And this is how we make this fine-tuning adjustment. We have to see, maybe I can look at this differently. Maybe this person that I'm so critical of is just showing me something about myself. And maybe there a Buddha actually teaching me something, or maybe I can learn about my own criticism there. Because frequently we criticize people for doing exactly what we're doing and not recognizing that it's we do this. And our ability to convert this karma comes out of this training process. The meditation itself is this incredible tool where we put ourselves in a position where we can open that heart in a way that allows those things to be seen differently. Because if the army of Mara is not seen as a threat, the arrows can't touch the Buddha. If those beautiful women are seen as what they're going to look like in another 50 years, then they're not quite so alluring. And it's a question of our ability to use the meditation to be still enough to see that there's another way of dealing with these problems that we experience as suffering. Because the suffering is the not wanting something to be there, or wanting something else to be there. The classic definition is being with the people you don't like and not being with the people you do like, and that sort of thing is having all sorts of ideas and opinion about who you like and who you don't like. If you see everybody as the Buddha, then it doesn't matter who it is. And everybody, in fact, is the Buddha. But you have to be able to see it. You can't see that unless you're looking with the eyes of a Buddha. Unless you're looking at beings and seeing their inherent purity and their worth, their value. And it's a very gentle process, this willingness to come back to being still. It's like when you're shifting the gears on your car and you're in reverse, you got to stop and get into neutral. And that's what this meditation is. It puts you in a place where you can shift gears and change how it is that you look at things. And it's something that all of us can do, but just doing a bit of meditation every day acknowledges the value of your spiritual training. And it's out of that you can start seeing things differently. And so when you run into these Nemesis dragons, or things that are fearful or bring up greed, just be there with that and take a look at how you're reacting to that. Because if you're reacting out of these emotionally conditioned patterns of behavior, you're not really responding from down here, the heart. And it's this willingness to bring the mind back to being still and sitting in the place that is undisturbed, which is in the heart, allows you then to respond in a different way. And each of us has to see this for ourselves. We have to see our own shortcomings, to see where our vulnerabilities, our propensities, and realize that there is room there to move. You are not stuck with old habit patterns. And that the only way you are stuck is if you're clinging to them and you're just bound and determined not to change. When you see that that's really creating a lot of suffering for yourself and other people, then there's room to change. And that's what that confession verse is about, is saying, oh, I've created these habits or inherited them. It doesn't matter who created them. I'm still stuck with them. I'm the one who has the responsibility for seeing that I can change them. And we have this wonderful tool of meditation. We have all the ceremonies that we do that basically come from Keizan. They're there to show us that daily life is a ceremony, whether it's brushing your teeth, going to the bathroom, washing the vegetables, washing the dishes, just whatever it is you're doing. It's the act of a Buddha if your mind is seeing that. But if your mind is not seeing that, it's, oh, I don't want to wash the dishes. I don't like to do that. or something. It's like this filter of likes and dislikes that creates the suffering. And we can see through that. It's just this flimsy little filter that we're looking at things through. One of our Chinese ancestors says, well, you just have to give up picking and choosing. Somebody else says, well, just give up disliking. You have to get to the picking and choosing part. Just stop the disliking. And that's the ceasing from evil. That's the letting go of those things that create the suffering. And saying, well, maybe there's a different way of looking at this. Maybe there's a way of confronting those difficult things with an open heart. To hold those sharp things in a gentle way. They don't hurt so much if they're held carefully. So I think that's it for today.